Welcome to the Professional Diploma in Web Development. If you've always had a keen interest in full-stack web development, then you've come to the right place. This course has been designed for both beginners as well as experienced web developers who seek a practical approach to web development. In this course, we learn all the fundamentals of web development and learn to code from scratch. We'll begin by installing and exploring our scripting environment, after which we'll move on to programming languages of the web. Now, this includes HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and even PHP. We'll cover both front-end and back-end technology stacks. Throughout the course, we'll develop a bunch of interactive web applications that you can add to your profile to strengthen your credibility as a full-stack web developer. From responsive e-commerce applications, style booking systems, and even HR systems, rest assured that this will be a hands-on course. As a bonus, you will also learn all about SQL databases and how to integrate them into your website. So stay tuned for all of this and more. In this lesson, we review the important and common HTML elements used in web development. Here we will focus on text level elements, grouping elements, and provide our website with a more coherent structure and flow by implementing very basic navigation. We'll also explore the importance of making comments in our code. Now, in today's lesson 3 of module 1, we will be focusing on working with HTML elements. Now, in our previous session, we kind of touched base with elements, but we didn't really go into detail because it was an introduction to HTML. In today's lesson, we're going to unpack elements in HTML. Now, let's have a look at what's coming up in this session. So in today's session, lesson 3, first we will be working with HTML elements and we'll describe some complex elements, and again this includes text level elements as well as grouping elements, commenting, and this includes things like the anchor tag element, okay, which is going to be quite important for our second topic, which is navigating web pages. And keep in mind, navigating a website or navigating between several pages is core in any sort of web development process, especially if you have multiple web pages designed for a particular website. And then we'll wrap things up with a web development practical session. Now you'll notice that moving forward we'll have a lot more practical sessions, and this is because we really want to solidify the knowledge that we're going through all the theory that we cover throughout this course. Now, without further ado, let's dive into our very first topic, and this will be working with HTML elements as promised. So let's have a look at some of the theory before we actually start with any practical, shall we? Now, let's start off with text level elements, and these are elements that appear inline and they are surrounded by other content, for example. Okay, this is why we refer to them as inline elements. And text level elements can allow you to change the appearance of certain inline content when it comes to HTML elements specifically. Now, we also have block level elements, but we'll be discussing that later on when we actually tackle more complex elements and other HTML attributes as we progress through this course. For now, we just need to know the very basics, and one of those basics is text level elements. Now, with that being said, here are a couple of examples when it comes to text level elements, otherwise known as inline elements. Now, first we have the anchor tag, and an anchor tag marks the content that acts like a hyperlink. Now, we are going to be working with this when we throw up our demo and we get our hands dirty in the practical. We also have the strong element or strong tag, and this formats the text to appear in bold, much like if you were using Microsoft Word, for example, and you decided to highlight a certain section of your text and make it bold. We can do the same in HTML. And then we have the code element, which allows you to format a piece of paragraph tag, for example, and it enables you to lay that out as if it was in a code editor. We also have the break tag, which represents a line break within grouping elements, so we can use the BR or the break tag to separate content, and we can think about the break tag as a grouping element as well. We also have the EM tag or EM element, and this formats your text to appear in italics, again much like you could do in Microsoft Word, for example, when you highlight a certain part of your text and you click the I button for italics. We also have the underline, and we can do this by simply referencing the U element. And then we have the span tag. Now, the span tag is quite powerful because the span tag allows you to add hooks into inline text, and that essentially means you can separate a piece of text but keep it in the same line using the span tag and taking that one specific piece of text that you want to style, and you can do so with the span tag. We also have the quotation element or quotation marks element, and this allows you to quote specific content in a paragraph, for example, and this is quite powerful when using things such as articles as well as blogs. And then lastly, we have the sub element, which marks text that should be treated as subscript. Wonderful stuff. Now let's move on to grouping elements. Now, grouping elements are not all that similar to inline or block level elements. We tend to use grouping elements when we want to organize content that shares similar characteristics, and this could be something like indenting a large part of a website when it comes to quotation or quoting from a journal article, for example, or even putting images together that share common characteristics. Now, there is a list that I will be showing you shortly, but essentially we need to think about grouping elements as taking content in a web page or a website and giving them some sort of uniformity. Okay, and here's an example of some of the grouping elements that you could actually use in web development. And our list looks something like this, more or less. First, we have the block quote element or tag, and this adds quotation marks as well as indentation to content. Now, this is different from the quote element in that you have indentation as well. We also have the div container, or otherwise just known as the div, and this is extremely popular in web development. And this is essentially just a element that contains a generic grouping of elements within a document. You can also use a div element to style things like blocks as well as give it some sort of animation as well. Okay, a div element is essentially just an empty container if you think about it. We also have the HR element, which is the horizontal line break, and this just adds a line break between content so that you can separate the content accordingly. So maybe you have one section of a website that speaks to a specific article, maybe you have another article that relates in similar ways, but you want to divide it accordingly. You can use an HR tag for that. You can also use an HR tag when you want to separate images on a website when you are describing products in an e-commerce website, for example. And then we have the OL tag, which is known as the ordered list. Now, the ordered list and the unordered list, which is the following one, the UL tag, they are pretty much the same thing, but they are used for different reasons. We would use the ordered list if we want to add numeric values to a list, or if you want to show certain steps in some sort of process, you would use an ordered list, because you could have a process that starts at number 1 and ends at number 5. There is a sequential flow in an ordered list. Okay, and an unordered list is different in that it does not contain any numbers. The list can be rearranged, there's no particular order, and what you'll find is this is extremely popular when it comes to building navigation bars. You would tend to use an unordered list. Unordered lists also use disks, for example, as opposed to numeric values. And then we have the list item element, and very, very important, the list item element is a sub element of an ordered list or an unordered list. A list item is the child element of an ordered list or an unordered list, and that's just another way to think of it. And a list item is just one item in a list. So if you have 5 items in a list, you would have 5 list items for each item in that list. And then also we have the navigation element, and the navigation element is ideal for hyperlinking and again creating text that you want to redirect to a different part in your website or a web page or even to an external page. And we will be working with the nav element shortly. Excellent. Now for our next topic in today's session, navigating web pages. And this is going to be important, especially because we are going to be doing a practical on this. So let's have a look at what navigating the web is all about. Now, navigating the web is all about hypertext as well as hyperlinking in HTML. We'll have a look at hyperlinking shortly, but let's have a look at what hypertext is all about. And essentially, hypertext is created using the anchor tag. And I mentioned earlier that this is quite important when we want to hyperlink a page or link one page to another using either just a single paragraph tag or an actual URL. And we would tend to use the anchor tag in combination with the href attribute, and attributes is still something we need to discuss, but just briefly here, the href attribute is a functional behavior of the anchor tag that allows you to actually designate a URL and where you want that link to link to. So you might have an external page or get an internal page, and the URL is essentially the address of where you want the page to be redirected to, especially if you are doing hyperlinking or hypertexting inside of your own web page. Okay, now let's have a look at hyperlinking. So we can think of navigation and hyperlinking as pretty much the same thing, more or less. And as we described before, when we talk about hyperlinking and navigation, it's essentially a system which is a section of a graphical user interface, also known as a GUI, like we discussed in lesson 1, and it's intended to aid a user or visitor in accessing information across a website or a web platform. And navigation systems use hyperlinking to allow users to navigate between web pages inside of a website or even outside of a website. Now let's have a look at the characteristics and some basic examples when it comes to hyperlinking. Now, what we essentially have here is just a very basic snippet of what a navigation system would look like in code. Okay, but let's have a look at the characteristics of how we achieve this. Well, essentially, when it comes to navigation and hyperlinking, the nav tag defines a set of navigation links. As seen in our code snippet over here, we have an unordered list with 3 list items, and inside of those list items we have anchor tags with an href attribute, and this is how we can link pages together. Okay, and then we often use the unordered list as opposed to the ordered list, as we mentioned before, specifically because we don't need any specific order when it comes to our navigation bar. Okay, and this again is why we always opt for an unordered list. We do not want numerics in our navigation bar or our navigation system. And then lastly, when developing a website locally, we have to make sure that we reference the file path correctly. If we don't, our links are not going to be directed to the pages that they are supposed to be directed to. Now, with that being said, if you are familiar with any sort of programming language out there, if you have experience with most programming languages, you know that adding comments in your code is extremely important. And we add a comment as a descriptive piece of text to our code. And keep in mind, comments don't render in the front end like the rest of your code will. Adding a comment is essentially used to describe what you are trying to achieve with your code. Okay, therefore does not render in the client or the browser. And this is quite important because we can add comments into our source code, especially if we want to explain what it is that we're trying to achieve with our code. Now, when other developers look at our code, this is quite nifty and handy because then it cuts down the time for them to have to go look at your code and figure out what you were trying to do. Whereas if you have a comment, it's straightforward and it explains what you're trying to do. Apart from this, it also helps you as a developer in the event that you haven't viewed your code in a long period of time and you revisit your code. It just helps you refresh your memory in terms of what you were trying to achieve. And then lastly, if you want to add a comment, this is the notation you would follow. You would have an open angular bracket with an exclamation mark followed by 3 dashes with your comment that you want to include, and then 2 dashes at the end with a closing angular bracket. And what we have in this code snippet over here is a very basic example of a comment. The comment in this example is grayed out, and therefore this lets us know in our IDE specifically that this is not going to be rendered out into the browser or the client. Wonderful stuff. Now, before we close off with our final topic where we do our practical, let's have a look at what's coming up in our next lesson. In our next lesson, we have a look at attributes, and attributes are a core function of any HTML code. In this lesson, we explore how, why, and when to use them to define the design and functionality of our website. Attributes are used to control the behavior of elements, and HTML attributes are a modifier of an HTML element type, and thus provides us with the ability to manipulate how elements function. Great stuff. Now that we have a brief introduction of what's coming up in our next lesson, I think it's time that we get our hands dirty with our next web development practical session. So without further ado, let's jump into Atom and let's code. Now, before we start coding in Atom, I just want to give you guys a preview of what we are going to be working towards in this practical. And essentially what you see is we have pretty much a website similar to the one we've developed in our first lesson, or our second lesson, but the only difference here is we now have links added to it. We've got a bit of extra content, and we have this navigation system where we can go from the home page to the learn code page, to the about us page, as well as the contact us page. Now, we don't have much content over here with the rest of the pages, and this is okay because the idea here is just to show you how we navigate between these two pages. The principle in terms of designing content for these pages remains the same as per when we work with the home page. Okay, so without further ado, let's dive in. So once you've booted up Atom, we can immediately start scripting. But remember, before we start scripting, it's very important to save your files as an HTML document. So I'm going to save this project first of all in my Show Academy sandbox, which should be here, right? And I'm going to save this in lesson 3, and I'm going to save this as index.html. Now you might be asking yourself, why do we call it index.html? Well, in most cases when it comes to web development, it's preferred that you save the entry point of your website or the home page of your website as index.html. Okay, so it's just for conventional purposes. You can name it whatever you would like to. I'll hit save, and then I can start scripting. So I'll open it up with the HTML tag, and then again, as we mentioned before, this just defines the document, and then we've got some other tags over here that we've mentioned in our second lesson, our first practical. Okay, and a lot of these things I will be copying and pasting from the existing revised project that I showed you we are working towards. Okay, just as a means to save time. And the reason I'm going to be doing this is because when it comes to coding or programming, it's extremely important to identify where and how you can reuse code. We refer to this as recycling or reusable code as developers. Okay, so for the most part, I'll be typing out the first script, and over here in my title, I'll just say my new website. Okay, and then what I want to go ahead and do is I want to start adding more content. So to do this, I will just save this, make sure everything's running perfectly. So my title is going to say my new website, and then I'm going to add content in the body. Immediately I'm just going to jump straight into the body. I don't necessarily have to add a header here if I don't want to, but I could if I wanted to. So maybe I should just actually be doing that. So I'll just say in my header over here, I will say header h1 tag, and I want this one to say hello world. Great stuff. I'll hit save. Okay, so I can also just make sure and validate that everything is working correctly by heading over to my Show Academy folder that I'm working from. So I'm just going to bring that folder over, and I'm going to go L3, I'm going to hit index, and there we go. We can see everything's working fine, and I can see my new website, hello world. So just minimize this, and we'll continue scripting. Okay, so after our header over here, we can jump right into our body tag. And in the body tag, I'm just going to include a div container, and this div container is going to hold my navigation. Okay, and the navigation is something we'll discuss in a second. So I'll say div, and remember, div tag is just an empty container. It doesn't really have anything associated with it. You can also give it a class, but again, that is something we'll get to. So in this div tag, I want to include a navigation bar. All right, so nav. So my opening tag, closing tag for nav, opening tag for div, closing tag for div. Okay, and then inside of here, I want an unordered list. Okay, because remember what we said, an unordered list is a way of sort of listing several items. And here, I'm just going to say UL, hit enter, and you'll see we are starting to nest our elements. Okay, this is what we mean by semantic design again, right? And then inside of here, my first list item is going to be of an anchor tag. So this is list item number 1, and what I'll show you is here just a quick example. I'll say 1, I'll copy this, and then I will paste it again, and paste it again. And again, this is just a quick demonstration. It's not something that's going to be static in our website. So over here, I'll say 2, this is list item number 3, and this is list item number 4. Wonderful. Save, hit back over to my browser. If I refresh this, now you can see that I have several list items 1 to 4, and this is an unordered list because it does not have a numeric value. Instead, it has these circles, or what we call disks. Okay, I'll just minimize that. I'll remove this, and in my website I had several links. Okay, and those links, they looked something like this. I need to add an anchor tag here. Now an anchor tag is how we can add a hyperlink to text. Okay, very, very important, and you must keep this in mind. So inside my list item, instead of adding a list item, I'm going to add an anchor tag. So you just hit a anchor tag, and now it's going to ask me for this href thing over here, right? And hashtag just means it's a dead link. It doesn't go anywhere. And in between these two tags over here, in between the opening tag for the anchor tag and the closing tag, I'm going to say, this is my home page. I'll save that. Now this href is an attribute, keep that in mind. Okay, we haven't covered attributes yet, but we will be doing so in the near future. So I'll save that, make sure everything's working wonderfully. I'll hit back over. If I refresh, I've got this link that looks like a home tag. If I click on it, nothing's going to happen because it doesn't take me anywhere yet. Okay, but I'm doing this on purpose so that we can actually define this at a later stage. So I'm going to do the exact same thing over here, where I'm going to say anchor tag, just hit A, autocomplete anchor, and then I'm going to call this one learn code, because everyone should at least learn code once in their life, right? And then another anchor tag for this list item, and this one I'm going to call about. And the last one over here, I'm simply going to call it anchor tag again. You can also copy and paste if you'd like to. I'm just trying to show you from scratch how to do all of this, okay? Because I know there are beginners that are going to be tackling this course. So contact us, and now I will save this. If I head back over to my website, there we go. So we've got some sort of navigation, but again, these links don't go anywhere. So for the time being, they're just dead hyperlinks. Okay, and again, we'll come back to this and we'll revise this when we start creating the other links. But for the time being, I want to move over to actually adding some additional content to my website, right? So below this div tag that I created, maybe I want to break my links on top away from the rest of the content. So I'll just create some space so it's more readable. I'll type in HR, which is a horizontal rule, okay? And a horizontal rule is just like a line break if you think about it. It separates your content. This is something we discussed in grouping elements. And this one takes in an attribute of width that we need to specify. And I'm going to say the width here is equal to 1300. You could say px at the end as well, but the client will know what I'm trying to say. So I'll say, and you need to add this in quotation marks, very, very important. So I'll say 1300. Okay, just like with these attributes, you have to add them in quotation marks because they are case sensitive. And then click save, head back over. Now you'll see I don't currently have a line here, but if I refresh the web page, now I've got this line break over here. Okay, so this just separates these links that I've created over here from the content I'll be creating at the bottom. You can increase the width if you want to. You can even go up to something like 1800 if you wanted to. Okay, but in future when we work on responsive design, we are not going to be hard coding values. Okay, so there we go. I think that looks a little better. Let's stick with that. Now once I'm done with that, I want to create a section. Okay, and if you remember, a section is just a specific designated part in your web page. So I'll just say section, hit enter. Let's get this right, section. And in the section, I want to add a simple paragraph. And this paragraph is just going to say, welcome to coding and technology. Okay, welcome to coding and technology. Okay, and then maybe I can just copy and paste what I've got on my screen already so that we don't have to spend too much time typing out things. Welcome to coding and technology. In this course, you will learn the basics of front-end web development, and don't forget to grab a cup of coffee. Okay, very, very important. As web devs, we are pretty much addicted to coffee. And if I refresh this now, there we go. I've got my first sentence over there, so it's coming together nicely. Okay, and this is being generated from that paragraph tag that I just created. Moving forward, I now want to add additional content. Okay, but maybe I want to add a break here. So the idea behind the break tag is to separate content. But before I add the break, I'll show you what I mean by what happens if we don't break out our content. So I'm going to create another section. Again, I'm just doing it the way I think is going to cover everything we've spoken about so far with regards to web development. So your approach can vary. You don't have to add sections if you don't want to. But in my case, I'm just going to go and do it anyway. So I'm going to say section over here. And then I'll add an h2 tag, which is a smaller heading than the heading 1 tag. And I'll say, what is HTML? Spell this correctly. What is HTML? I'll refresh, make sure everything is working properly. So remember, Control and S on a Windows system if you want to save on the fly. And there we go. So what is HTML? But for some reason, this feels a bit too close, right? So what I can do is I can use a break tag here just to split it up nicely or to give it some space. So I can do this either within my section or I can do it outside of my section. I'll just get into add here, PR for break. This tag does not have a closing tag. Remember earlier on I said in our previous lesson that only some tags come with a closing tag, okay, but all tags generally have an opening tag. So I'll hit save, come back, refresh, and now it's, I don't know if you noticed, but it sort of just pushed it down slightly. Okay, now it's spaced out nicely as well. And then I'll just hit back over here, and what I'll do is I'll add another paragraph in the section, because I don't just want the heading standing alone. So I'll say P for paragraph, and in here I'm just going to copy and paste some text regarding hypertext. Okay, so let's see what we have so far. Just making sure everything is proper, correct stuff. So over here I'm just going to copy and paste the content I already have on my PC. You can type whatever you would like to over here. This is my opening tag for the P, and this is my closing tag. What I can also do is I can just bring this down to make it more human readable, and I can indent this slightly if I wanted to. Okay, that's not working properly. Maybe we can just keep it like that. Okay, and if I refresh now, there we go. So I've got additional content below that. So our website seems to be coming together nicely. Wonderful stuff. So that is our second section. Now I want to add one more section to our website. And to do this, I'll just, outside of the previous section tab that we created, or the previous section element, I'll just say section again. And in here, I'm going to add an H4 tag, which is a heading 4. Okay, and here I'll just say characteristics of HTML. Okay, so I can just copy and paste again. So inside of here, there we go. Save. Hit back, make sure everything's still working beautifully. There we go. And what you'll notice is here's a heading 1 tag, here's a heading 2 tag, and here's a heading 4 tag. So we are subdividing and breaking up our information on our web page nicely in a way that we can see the flow and which part of the website is core content and which is subcategories or subheadings for our website. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an ordered list over here. Previously we added an unordered list. We can tell by these disks over here. So I'm going to add an ordered list in here, right under my H4 tag. I'll say, give it some space. I'll just say OL, and then we'll get the autocomplete for ordered list. Okay. Now I need to list my items inside of here. Okay. And remember, we just use the LI tag for that. So we just say LI, this item. I can copy and paste this. How many do I need? I need about 5 of these. So I'll copy and paste this 5 times. Great stuff. Save that, and I'm just going to copy and paste the content that I already have. And the first one is essentially, this is one of the characteristics of HTML, that it uses elements and tags to build web page structures. Okay. Apart from this, it also just copy and paste, enables media files to be embedded in web pages, such as audio files as well as video clips. And then the next one, and the reason I'm doing this is because I feel like it's going to sort of solidify your understanding of HTML and how it works. So HTML also semantically defines web pages for text, paragraphs, and headings. Now I've got 2 more left. It also allows for developers to embed JavaScript code. Lovely stuff. And I'll do a refresh in just a second. And then I'll add another one, which is the final one. So elements have tags as well as attributes. Save. Great. Let's hit back over and see what we have so far. Wonderful. So now we have the characteristics of HTML as well. Okay, and you'll notice here the difference in the list and an unordered list and an ordered list is that, again, there's no particular order to this list, whereas here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got 5 characteristics that we've mentioned where HTML is concerned. Okay, so I hope that makes sense, and I hope the use case makes sense as to when and why and how we would use an ordered list versus an unordered list. Okay, so that brings us to the end of that section. Now let's see what do I have so far. The section is done. One last thing I want to add is a footer. Now remember, a footer is that last part of your website, and you don't have to include it in the body. You could if you wanted to, but best practice, in terms of speaking best practice, you want to add a footer to the bottom of the website. And a footer is exactly what it sounds like, the bottom part of the website. And yeah, I'm simply just going to say something like my website. Let's say, yeah, my website, my HTML website, my HTML website, and I'm going to add an ampersand over here as well as the word copy. Now when you add ampersand copy, it's going to give you a copyright signature. Okay, normally you would add the year to this if you wanted to. The only reason I'm showing you this is because you'll notice on some websites they have this copyright sign with the year and the name of the company or the organization. Okay, so I'm going to hit save. Especially if your client has copyright content, you really want to make sure that you copyright it. Okay, in this case I'm just making an example. If I save now I've got my HTML website copyright. Normally you would add the year as well. Wonderful. Okay, so that was a bit of a speed coding session. Now we can move on to adding the navigation to our website, which I think is going to be very, very important and one of the core functions moving forward when we continue with web development. So let's get on to it. So I'm going to head back into Atom. Okay, and now I need to link those links up. I need to complete my navigation system by adding additional links in here or pages. Okay, so I'll just save this first of all. And now that that has been saved, I can start creating my new files for this over here. And just bear with me for a second because this will all make sense in just a bit. So I have 4 different links over here. I've already created the home page, which is our current page that we've been working on. Okay, so in Href over here, we are expecting a URL instead of a hashtag, because remember hashtag is just a dead link. So I'm just going to say index.html so that we know moving forward that is my index page. Okay, and then over here I need to create several other pages to link to, because remember we're talking about navigation and hyperlinking. So I'm going to create a new file. It will pop up right here, and essentially what I'm going to say is I'm just going to save this as, what other pages do we have? We had learn code again .html. Okay, very, very important to not forget that step. And then another new file, and this one I'm going to call about. So I'll say save as about.html. Okay, and then one last page to meet and satisfy the fact that we have 4 links. Okay, so new file, I'll say save as, the last one was contact us, I believe, contact us.html. Wonderful. Now I have all 4 pages currently available to me, so I need to start linking them to my index file over here. And to do this, we have to reference the file path. Now remember, when we talk about a file path is essentially where a file sits in any given directory. They are levels to file paths, and there is something I'll discuss briefly. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to link this up with the learn code page, underscore code.html. You also have to specify HTML here, so if you leave out the extension, it's going to throw an error. Okay, because we are pointing this link, we are pointing that to the learn code HTML page. Okay, and then our next one over here was about.html, and then this one over here was contact us. And I'll show you what all of this looks like in a second. It's not going to be desirable because it's not really going to work the way we want it to work, but at least we have linked it up now. Okay, so if I come back over here, if I refresh and I click on home, this is my home page. If I learn code, I've got nothing going on. I've just got this thing that says learn code at the top. Same with this, and exactly the same over here. Okay, so then I need to fix this up because I want these pages to be apparent. I want them to be visible. And what I can do to sort of get around this, just to show you and demonstrate to you quickly how linking works, I'm going to copy and paste everything from my index file, and then I'll be deleting a couple of things. Okay, so for a Windows system, Control and A, and it highlights everything in my document, and then I'll just say Control and C to copy that after it's been highlighted. I'm going to come back to this learn code over here, and I'm just going to paste everything in here. Now I don't want these pages to look exactly the same, so I want there to be some variation in what's going on. So I will remove everything up until, from my HR tag over here, up until my footer. My body I can keep. Okay, so because my body tag opens up there, so I need to keep my closing body tag over there. I'll delete the footer as well. Okay, I'll save that. And now before I make any heavy changes, I want to do this again for all the other pages that I've created. Okay, and they're going to be very similar in nature, apart from the heading that's going to change. So I'm going to copy this, paste it over here, save it, head back over here. Remember, it's all about code reusability where you can, unless you're talking about memory leaks, but that is a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. And now I'm going to head back to my index. Now here we have hello world, and we can validate that by simply seeing that we have hello world over here. Now if I click over here, I'm just going to get hello world, hello world, hello world. Now again, I want it to be some sort of variation between the other pages. So I'm going to get back over here, and I'm going to change my learn code page. I'm going to change this to learn code. Save that. I'm going to change the h1 tag at the top to about. Save that. And I'm going to change the contact us page to contact us. Yeah, let's just say contact us with capitals. Great. So now we have an index page, which is hello world. We have a learn code, which says learn code, about, which is about, and likewise with the contact us page, which says contact us. Save that, hit back over, and now home, perfect, learn code, great stuff, about, and contact us. And there you go. Within 20 minutes, you managed to build a very, very basic website that has navigation as well. Okay, so as you progress through this, as you do this more often, and as you continue practicing, I can guarantee you that this is going to become second nature to you. Writing out code becomes second nature to you at some point. Okay, now let's see what else can we actually add to this website. What I would suggest you do is maybe packages. I've got this package installed. It's called Beautify, and what it does is it takes all my code and it makes it flow nicely. Like you'll see what I have here currently. It's visually appealing to an extent up until here maybe, but then as you're reading your code, it's not all that pretty. So what you can do with the package is Atom Beautify, and I'll show you how to install it in a sec. You click on the Beautify and it shifts everything and it makes everything flow a lot better. Now this looks a lot more like a human readable HTML document. So how do you get this package installed? Well, packages is something we'll dive into at another lesson, but for the most part, I want to show you just how to do this briefly. Okay, so in your file tab, you can click on settings, navigate to packages, and then you can filter your packages over here. Now I already have it installed, as you can see over here, but what you can type in is atom-beautify, and it will pop up. It will filter your results. Okay, and the one you need to install is the one by Glavin 001. Okay, again, I already have it installed, therefore I have this uninstall button available to me. Also make sure it's active. Okay, so once you have it installed, probably just give Atom a reboot just to make sure everything's working nicely. And then when you want to unify your code and make it flow a lot better, again, you just click on packages. All the packages will be available to you here. Click on Beautify and it will structure everything really, really nicely for you. Now, last thing, commenting in HTML. Now, I'm going to make one comment here, and it's going to be a very similar comment to what we saw in our slides. So to comment, open angular bracket, dash, dash, actually open, there we go, and then your comment over here. I'll do a proper comment in a second. I just want to sort of duplicate what we did previously. So now what we can see here is this is grayed out. Okay, now I'm going to put my comment in here. So remember, your comment needs to come between these parameters over here. Let me just remove this. So again, open angular bracket, exclamation mark, triple dash, and then I'll say this is my let me just get this spelled right, navigation system with 4 links. Okay, dash dash, close angular bracket, and again we'll see that it's grayed out. So I will save this, and then what I'll do is I'll come back to my client. I'll refresh this. So remember, I created that in my home page, and you'll see it's not showing at all. It doesn't display, right? And we can validate this because we can see that we created this code above the navigation system that we created here. So in theory, if this code was readable, it should have shown just below hello world. If I refresh, I'm still getting nothing. And this The reason behind this is because, again, keep in mind, commenting on your code is just a way for other developers to see what's going on in your code. It's not meant to be displayed to the user or the front end client. Okay? And I think that brings us to the end of our session for this particular session. And I really, really hope the session was useful for you. I know that we might be moving a little too fast, but at the same time, I'm trying to just show you the basics so that you can practice these basics and then implement them at a later stage where it becomes second nature for you.